Hello, and thank you for joining today. My name is Al D. I am the founder of MBA Schooled, which is an online blog about how MBA students can make the most of their MBA experience, which offers tips and expert guidance from the people who know the MBA best, which are MBA students and graduates. And I'm excited today to do a webinar about how MBA students can make the most of their MBA experiences. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to share 6 best practices and 6 tips that you as MBA students and prospective MBA students can use and think about to get the most out of your MBA experience. And for those of you who are following along at home and want to learn more, you can always check out my website, mbaschool.com. You can find me on Twitter and to engage and chat more. And before I get too deep, I'm really excited because I'm actually writing a book about business school. It's called Inside the MBA, and it's all about how MBA students can get the most out of their MBA experience. And what I'll actually be doing in this webinar is previewing some of the work that I've been doing with this book that I'm self-publishing later this year. If you're interested in learning more, or you want to get a sneak peek of what the first few chapters are like, check out this link here right now, and you'll be able to get some access to that. All right, so let's jump in. So to start, let's take a look at where we are today when it comes to thinking about the MBA in business school. And when we think about that, we can't ignore the fact that we have to take a look at where we are in this landscape of the world and with business. And business is going through an interesting time right now, right? As many of you probably have seen, a couple of weeks ago, the Business Roundtable, which was a group of about 181 CEOs of some of the largest companies in the world, said that they were going to reevaluate the word shareholder value meant. They wanted to think about how they can make this more inclusive of not only just shareholders, but stakeholders. And with stakeholders, other members outside of just the people who are buying in the company. So the people in the community, the employees, the communities they serve. Some people kind of view this as lip service, but what it's showing is that the business world is changing in terms of how we typically think about business. And as a result of business changing, one of the things that's also changing is business school itself. One of the things that we're seeing, many of you applicants out there or current MBA students, you know this, there are more types of MBA type programs today in terms of online and part-time. But in addition to that, there are lots of other business master's programs, specialized programs that are a little bit shorter, a little bit more focused on a particular area, such as a master's in analytics or a master's in supply chain. So there's a whole bunch of other opportunities that are out there right now to meet the needs of the market. But what's also interesting and what's changing is that companies are changing and employers are changing. There's some research out there by Deloitte that says that there are about 61% of companies are redesigning and rethinking career models. In the old world, many people signed up to join a company and spent the next 30 years there, maybe in a variety of different roles, but then they retired, got their gold watch, and went off into the sunset. While there's still people that do that today, that's very rare. As a result, companies are having to rethink how they create their org charts and their career progressions. And many of these are the companies that many MBA students are going to end up working at. It's also changing for employees. There is some research out there that says about 70% of employees are anxious about their skills. And just like employers are rethinking their career models because the nature of work is changing, employees are also recognizing that everything is changing too. Gone are the days when you could develop a set of skills and use it for the next 10, 15, 20 years of your career. In fact, there's some research out there by Deloitte that suggests that the average skill, the shelf life of it, or the half-life of it, if you will, is only a couple years, which means that as you kind of go every few years, you need to develop new skills. And then last but not least, we're working a lot longer than we used to be, right? The retirement age is what they set, or when you can start receiving Social Security right now is 65, right? And that has kind of always been the anchor for how we think about retirement and careers. But now, because we can live longer because of advancements in health and science, we're working longer. So these are just setting the context for what people are going into as they think about business school, as they look to go to companies that are changing the way that they're designing their career development, as they go and think about the employees that are out there who are realizing that their skills are changing, and knowing that when you're going to business school now, you're not just thinking about that first job out of business school, you're thinking about the others that could follow after that. And when you're in school, there are a lot of exciting opportunities, but there's also a lot of challenge, right? it can be a really challenging time. And there's a number of different challenges that students face. Not all of these are on the slide, but I wanted to talk through a few common ones that I often hear and certainly experience myself. First and foremost is the uncertainty of your future. Many students go to business school with an idea in mind of what they want to do. Others, maybe not so much, but it still very much is a bet. Even though it's a bet and particularly a lot of times on an institution that has a good track record or has good credibility, there's never guarantee that things are going to work out. And so as you're in school, a lot of times you're dealing with this challenge around uncertainty in terms of, will this work out? Or for some people, they go to business school with a couple ideas of what they have in mind, but they're going with the intention of trying to understand which of these paths they're going to follow. And the second hurdle that I often hear is this idea of that there's so much to do, which is amazing, but that's also the challenge in that there are so many amazing opportunities and there's never enough hours in the day, right? And so the challenge often then becomes is how do you pick and choose? How do you figure out what you want to do? The third is around this idea of change, right? And I always think that change is this really funny concept where, for a lot of people, change is fine, but then when it happens to ourselves, that's when it's not fine, right? And certainly business school is a time of change. Many people are leaving the workforce to go back to school. There's certainly an adjustment there. You're changing in terms of folks who are looking to change careers or looking to get into a new field. You're being forced to learn new things. That can be really challenging. That can be a big hurdle to kind of come up over. And then last but not least, is something I like to call the crowd and then the herd, right? And this is the whole concept of when you're in business school and you're surrounded by so many like-minded people who are very similar, but also have some unique, diverse and unique differences. It can be really easy to look up and see what people are kind of gravitating towards and want to gravitate towards that thing because you think you need to, because that's what everyone else is doing. And because people are in this environment around each other so often, and you're in a bubble where you see each other so often, it can be really challenging to continue to follow the path that you want to take when you're constantly being told, you're constantly surrounded by other people saying, oh, you should do this or you should do that. And these are some of the many that are here, but these are some of the common ones. But the reality of it is that business school is actually it truly is a one of a kind, experience. And there are many reasons what makes business school unique. And I wanted to share a few that I have seen, but also, came up over and over time and time again in my book. So the first is just the people, right? In terms of being around a couple hundred people who are all smart, driven, talented, as well as, having diverse backgrounds. There are very few times when you can get a chance like this to be in an environment where, again, everyone there is directionally kind of marching towards the same goal in terms of graduating with a degree. And you have a chance to be surrounded by really intelligent, hardworking people to kind of learn from or learn with. And that is very rare. And the opportunities to grow your own knowledge as well as to build relationships it really is unique because you just don't get many opportunities like that. The second reason is just the sheer resources and the ability to try and learn new things. This is just something that's inherent, I think, a lot of times in academic environments, particularly institutions of higher education, right? You choose a school because they have this, right? And it's not just the faculty, although a part of it is the faculty in terms of the knowledge they bring, the research that they share, and the expertise they bring. But it's also your other classmates. It's the programs that they offer, the ability to kind of work with other diverse groups of people in other parts of the MBA program, and certainly the administrators that work there too. All of these things add to this environment in business school where you just have a lot of resources at your disposal to take advantage of. The third is around this idea of the cost of failure, right? And all of this comes back to the fact of, when you're working and you're working in a company, if you have a decision to do something, there's a chance that it could fail. And when you're in a business and you have customers, if you fail, there's a cost to that. In business school, there certainly is a cost, right? And certainly in terms of the tuition that you pay. But if you try something and you maybe fail at it or it doesn't work out, that cost is a little bit lower. So you have a little bit more luxury of trying something to see if it's going to work out or not. That said, again, you're still paying tuition, so it's not necessarily cost-free. But the ability to try and learn and test something is a little bit cheaper to do than to do it on the job. And then last but not least is this notion around having a time for reflection. I think that particularly for driven, career-minded individuals, it can be really easy to focus on executing the task at hand or checking off things off the to-do list, which is all well and good. But sometimes it prevents people from the ability to take a step back and reflect upon what you're doing or what you are learning from the experience or what you did well and what you could have done better. But when you have, particularly if you're a full-time MBA student, this experience where you're constantly getting time to think about what you did, or you're constantly given the chance to get feedback or to provide feedback to other people, it actually makes you really think. And if you choose to take advantage of that, there's a lot of learning about yourself that can really happen. And that really furthers your own growth and development from here on out. So in spite of all those challenges, business school really can be a one-of-a-kind experience. Okay, so knowing this context and knowing how unique this experience is, what I want to do is I want to offer you 6 tips of, if you're a current MBA student, of how you can get started in terms of making the most of your experience. And if you're a prospective MBA student, these are the things you should be thinking about as you start to fill out your applications and send them in to prepare for your own journey in the months and the weeks and months to come. So I've narrowed it down to about 6. There's so many other ones, but I want to focus on these 6 in this webinar and not only explain them to you, but maybe share some stories about how I've seen these in action, and then hopefully provide you with some tips on actions, like tactical things that you can put into place right away to take advantage of these specific tips. So first and foremost, it's just this first one I think is one of the most important, is to chart your own course. What this really comes down to is that you will be most successful when you align yourself to the path that is yours, not anyone else's, but yours alone. As I mentioned earlier, when you're in business school and surrounded by so many smart people who are all doing really interesting things, it's really easy to get caught up in terms of what everyone else is doing, right? In terms of what are people gravitating towards and what is the quote unquote sexy, topic or industry or opportunity that everyone is going to pursue. While that is well and good, and there's probably good reason for what that is, at the end of the day, the moment that you start measuring your own success and measuring your own path to success off of things that are not your own is the moment that you start measuring to a bar of success that also is not your own. And that can be challenging in so many ways, because while it may help you achieve a certain goal or outcome, if that's not what you want, at some point that's going to catch up to you. I love this quote by Jasmine, where she talks about how when she was at Yale, the situations where she thrived the best were when she pursued activities that were aligned to her. And it's that moment when you're doing something that you know that you're meant to be doing, it just feels different. You want to give a little bit more. You want to extend a little bit further. It feels a little bit less like hard work and more just, and while it maybe is a lot of work, it's something that you're focused on. And in terms of how do you go about charting your own course, how do you make sure that you're focusing on the things that are going to give you the most meaning, or that are going to give you happiness, or that are going to be focused on your version of success? Well, it's about being able to actually ask yourself, what are my own metrics for success? Another thing that I often think about is, when this is all over, when your MBA is all over, like, how do you want to feel, right? Like, what do you want to walk away with? And what do you want to make sure that you did at the end of this to make sure that you achieved what you set out to? And this can be as simple as, revisiting for your MBA application and looking at those goals that you set for yourself. And I would also realize that sometimes some of us do apply, and that either our goals change, or maybe we kind of architected them in a way that weren't truly ours. And so take the time right now to go and write your goals down and evaluate the progress that you've made against them. And then go and do some work. And then in a month again, or 2 months, come and revisit them and get into a mindset of continuously evaluating to see how you're progressing against them. But charting your own course is going to enable you to achieve your own version of success. The second tip is being able to turn your strengths into opportunities. And this is around the idea that when you're in school, everyone has their own strengths that they bring to the table. That's why admissions officers try to really be intentional about choosing a diverse class, because they want different strengths so that everyone can learn from each other and contribute. But one of the things I think is really important is that you take those strengths and you put them into action, whether it's to help yourself or whether it's to help others. And this may seem altruistic, and maybe it is, but there's also some really other important reasons for why you should do this. And, I think particularly early, if you're early on in your time in business school, there's a lot that's being thrown your way, whether it's new classes, whether it's trying to figure out what you want to recruit for a summer internship, whether it's trying to work with your study team and collaborate on assignments and projects and tests, and a lot of other things. And this can tend to be a little chaotic at times. But in addition to that, you're also trying to figure out how to make an impact, and how to build relationships, and how to work in groups and on teams. And I think that one of the best places to start in those moments of challenge, or when you're trying to figure things out of how you're going to make an impact, is start with your strengths, right? Start with the things that you know that you're good at and you can contribute, because number one, particularly on a group setting, it's going to help you play a role in achieving that group level of success. But number two, it's also going to give you a little bit of confidence, right? In the sense of when you feel like you're using a strength, it makes you more engaged, but it gives you the confidence that you belong, or that you can contribute to the rest of the group. And I love this quote from Ben when he talks about how putting your strengths to use allows you to teach and learn, but it also helps you build those relationships with other people, right? And this is a reflexive thing in the sense that when you go and help other people, it's also going to make them more willing to want to help you. And just as you would kind of seek out using your own strengths in something, this is also something you can do when you need help, right? Is to, if you're in a class, per se, that you don't have a lot of experience in, like if you don't have a lot of experience in accounting, go find someone whose strength is in accounting, who can go and teach you some of those things, right? And so how do you think about this? How do you make this real? So it really starts with understanding what your strengths are, right? So it's simply asking yourself, what am I good at? And there should be enough evidence, hopefully, I'm pretty sure there is in your life, where you can kind of pinpoint what those are. But if not, you can use things like StrengthsFinder, which is a survey that's built by Gallup that helps you kind of identify your strengths, that I know many MBA programs use, and actually see what those strengths are. And then when you're in any group situation, particularly any group situation, you should always be thinking about, how do I use my strengths to add value to those around me? And again, particularly when you have a lot of things going on and you're kind of overwhelmed, you're trying to figure out what should I do. When you're trying to figure out what that thing is, think about how do I can use my strengths in this specific situation. Okay. The third thing, and the third tip, is around being able to allocate your time to your priorities. One of the things that business school often teaches students is that time is the most valuable asset. And what you really need to do to action on this is to learn how to allocate it in the right way. Business school really does give you so many experiences and opportunities, which is one of the reasons why it is so unique. And these experiences and opportunities can be things that help you grow your career. They can help you develop yourself personally. They can get you an opportunity to travel the world. They can get you exposure to a new field. And all of those are inherently, even in themselves, great things. But at the end of the day, you only have so many hours in a day. You only have so many days in a week. You only have so many weeks in a month. And you have 2 years in business school. So while it'd be great to do everything, the reality is that you can't. Or the reality is that while you could spread yourself really thin and try to do everything, it really prevents you from being able to do a number of small things well. One of the things that often happens in business school, just as in life, but particularly in business school, is this notion of FOMO, or the fear of missing out. And just this whole idea of when something comes up, a new opportunity comes up, or something that you start to you feel like you need to take advantage of it, because if you don't, you're afraid you missed out on it, or that it won't ever happen again. And I love this quote from Jordan, because what Jordan talks about in the book is this idea of, instead of FOMO, think of JOMO, this whole concept of joy of missing out. And what JOMO really is all about is that it's acknowledging that there are trade-offs and that you can't do everything. But in the choice to choose to do something, you're excluding from doing other things, right? And that can be really powerful and very empowering in a way. And particularly knowing that, yes, it may be hard to say no to an opportunity right now, but there's a chance it could come around in the future. Not to mention, it gives you a chance to focus on what you need to focus on at the moment, right? And so as you think about this, think about what actually are your priorities. And a really good way to do this is to really actually figure out what did you say no to this week? It's very easy to say yes to things at times, but like, what did you actually say no to this week? In terms of actions, a couple things you can do. One, you can actually write down your priorities and rank them, right? So forcing yourself to go through an exercise where you have to evaluate what your priorities are. The other thing that you can do is to actually do a calendar audit. So take a look at your calendar over the last week or the last month or whatever it is, and figure out where are you spending your time? And then figure out, is that time that you're spending, is it allocated against your priorities? And if it's not, what do you have to change? How can you make sure that moving forward, you are using your time to pursue the right priorities? And what I've actually done is I've kind of given you a little bit of a thought framework of how you can think about these priorities, right? And this is just an example. It doesn't have to be the same as yours, but if you think about business school in a couple different buckets, there's your recruiting, there's your academics, there's social, there's extracurricular. And you can kind of use this to map out how many priorities do I have for each of these? And what is the order of them? And then broadly speaking, how much of my time do I want to invest in each of these 4 buckets? Again, you can kind of make this your own, but this is a good way to think about how are you managing the priorities that you have. Okay, the next one is this: become a lifelong learner. One of the things that you'll realize is that you're going to need to learn for the rest of your career. And one of the best places to learn how to learn is in grad school, particularly in an MBA program. Learning is so important to the workplace. And as we talked about in the beginning, as careers become longer, as the shelf life of a skill becomes shorter, there's going to be this focus and prioritization on the ability to learn new skills and continuously do that over and over and over again as you progress in your career. Being in business school is a really great time, not only to develop skills, but to be able to develop a mechanism for continuously learning as you evolve and grow. And the reason why it's so good, or it is such a good environment, is because you actually have the time and the resources that are around you to actually go and make this happen. And I think that this quote from Katie really illustrates this in terms of, for her, business school is a great time to take on stretch opportunities. And through this, she was able to learn and grow new skills and new experiences. And it also kind of almost incented her and hooked her on this idea of, this is something I always want to do. I always want to stretch myself. I always want to learn and grow. I don't want to just relegate that to just being in school. I want to take this mindset of putting myself in positions where I learn and evolve, and continuously do that for the rest of my career. This is going to be a really important skill to have, regardless of whatever field or profession you go into after business school. And I think being in an academic environment right in business school is something that will learn and help you. So in terms of how you can think about this is, first and foremost, trying to understand how you learn best. Some folks learn best in a lecture from a classroom professor and just kind of taking in that information. Other people learn best from getting the practical real world insights or examples of how that happened. Other people really like the experiential learning where you're putting it into action or doing a project. Business school is a great time to test out how you learn best if you don't already know. The other thing that you can do is start to keep track of your learning. It's a really simple concept, but every now and then ask yourself, like, what did you learn this week, and how did you take on something that was uncomfortable, right? If you're getting to a point where you're feeling very comfortable with what you're doing, it probably means there's opportunity for you to continue to learn more. And if you're constantly putting yourself in a position where you're learning more, that's going to build up that skill of being able to do lifelong learning. So in terms of what this means, figure out some of those skills that you want to develop when you're in school, right? And in addition, this isn't in addition to maybe just merely gaining the accounting knowledge you need to read a balance sheet, or understanding the 4 Ps of marketing. This is also other skills that you think are going to be important to you, whether it's for your summer internship or your future career. And then once you identify those skills, figure out where you can put those into practice. As I said before, there are so many experiences and opportunities to learn and grow in business school, whether they're through extracurricular clubs, taking on a leadership role. And some programs, being able to work with a leadership coach, they have those opportunities, or to travel the world to learn about new countries or how business is done. But once you develop those skills, you can start to think about, what are the opportunities that are out there where I can learn how to take advantage of this. And so not only are you gaining the skill, but by putting yourself in positions where you're constantly figuring out a skill you want to develop and finding a way to actually learn it, you're building up that lifelong learning muscle that you can take with you far beyond just those 2 years in business school. The next is this idea about being able to experiment and take risks. And I love this quote, which is, growth and comfort don't go hand in hand. Business school is a great time to experiment and take risks because you are in an environment where not only can you try something and the cost of failure will be lower, but you're surrounded by other people who can help you learn through that process, that failure process, where you can get constant and rapid feedback, where you can take advantage of the resources to experiment. This is something that when it's hard to get this kind of richness of resources in many other scenarios, and also the time as well as the opportunity to kind of experiment and explore. And Colin Keeler is a perfect example of this. So Colin, who just recently graduated from Wharton, realized when he was in business school that he had an idea to start his own company. And he went and did it and took advantage of many of the resources and experts that were at Wharton to test this idea, to get feedback, to validate that it was a potential opportunity, and then to actually go and grow and scale a business. And I love what he says here in this notion of not taking a risk is actually the bigger risk than failing itself, right? I think in our heads sometimes that we don't want to do something because we're afraid of failing. And what we then realize at times is that the bigger failure is not trying in the first place. I mean, fundamentally, it goes back to the whole, Michael Jordan quote, you miss 100% of the shots that you don't take. And I think the business school environment where you do have resources at your disposal, where you have other people around you who can support you and give you feedback, where you have the time to go and try things, is a great opportunity to do that. So here, first and start off is asking, what's something you wanted to do but you're too afraid to do? And then in terms of the actions you can take, once you've kind of identified what are those things, it's looking for the resources, the people in the programs who can guide and give you feedback, who can test this out. And then it's going to actually test or build like a small experiment or MVP, minimum viable product, right? This is all about coming up with a quick and dirty hypothesis of what it is that you want to experiment with, and then putting it out there to test and getting feedback in real time. And doing the smaller experiment can sometimes de-risk in many ways, because as opposed to having this grand plan that either works or doesn't, and if it doesn't work, you've invested a ton of time and money, you're starting off a little bit smaller and getting a little bit of feedback. And then if it's working, you can kind of go on to the next thing with it. Or if it doesn't work, you can kill it, as opposed to like having to learn that the harder way after you've invested a lot more time and energy and money. And so this is really a great time to experiment and take risks. I do think it's something you have to be thoughtful about in terms of you can't take risks with every single thing. For some of you, this may mean with trying out a career that could be a little risky. For others, it may just mean a new leadership opportunity or something like that. Like everyone's risk profile will be a little bit different, but I do think that the environment in business school is a great time to, in general, experiment and take risks. Next one is this idea of investing in relationships. Many of you probably went to business school because you wanted to meet new classmates, build relationships with professors. And you wanted this because you knew that their knowledge and their insight was going to make the experience richer for you. And I think while you're there in business school, it's really important to be thoughtful and intentional about how you actually go about doing this. And I love this quote from Dave, who I interviewed for my book, who talks a little bit about how just how much the experiences he had were influenced by the people that he shared those experiences with. And this is something that I can certainly attest to in my own experience in business school. For example, One of the things I was involved with when I was in business school was MBA Student Association, and working on the leadership team. I worked every day with about 8 or 9 other different classmates during my second year, and to this day, I'm still very close with a lot of those people. And not only did it enrich my experience back then, but it is still something that I take with me to this day. And these are some of the people that have been really helpful to me in my career as I've had to make career decisions or I needed feedback and advice. Um, and with many of you who are at programs that do have a diverse kind of class base, there's so many different people that you can meet, and there's so many different experiences you can take advantage of. But this idea here is just being thoughtful about taking the time to like actually build these relationships. And the first question I would kind of have you think about is, what are the ways I can build relationship with those others, right? Like this happens a lot of times naturally in terms of being on a study team or a learning team and having to work on assignments together and getting to know people there. But it can also happen, like in my case, being involved in an extracurricular activity, or for some of you, particularly if you're recruiting, a lot of times you do spend a lot of time with the other people who are recruiting with you. The investment bankers spend a lot of time with the investment bankers, and the consultants could spend a lot of time with the consultants. But there are other ways to do this as well. I think one of my most interesting ways in which I met other people and really built some relationships was that when I was in business school, we used to host dinner at my apartment every Tuesday with the other different classmates, where we got the chance to really get to meet them, and in some cases their families, and got to know them on a much deeper and more meaningful level. So many people often say that the people are one of the best parts of the MBA experience. And this is just a reminder to make sure you take the time to invest in those relationships with other people. The last tip is to practice self-awareness and reflection. Now is the time to truly get to know yourself. I think in life, it's really easy to get caught up in focusing on what you need to do and being able to get it done well and executing against it. And I think that's really important. But I also think it's really important to always take a step back and think about what it is that you've done or what you've learned, as well as to really actually to get to know yourself and who you are. And sometimes it can be really hard to be intentional about making time to ask those questions or to get to know yourself. But when you have 2 years where you're constantly thinking about your own personal development and how you're growing, it naturally lends itself to giving you the chance to practice that self-reflection and the opportunity to really get to know yourself better. And when I talk to Shannon, I love the quote that she has here because I think it's so true. And what she says is that in a world that moves so fast and work that demands so much of our time and mental energy, school really allows you to pause and think about who you are, what you're good at, and how you can make an impact in the world in a meaningful way. And that may seem for many of you as a lofty goal, and I certainly think that it is. But I think the point of what she's trying to say is really important, that while execution and getting things done is really important, so is getting to know who you are, and also taking the time to think about what you've done. And so how can you use this to your advantage, right? So first and foremost is thinking about how you are progressing and how you are developing. Thinking about every so often, like taking the time to ask yourself a couple questions of, what did I do well this week? What could I have done better? Or what's an example where, I really made an impact, and starting to tease it out. But the other great thing about business school is that it's a really great time to get feedback from your peers and to ask others, particularly whether it's working on a team in the classroom, or in a group project, or with a club, to get feedback, right? To ask them about what they see your strengths are, or how they perceive how you're doing, or when you're working on something, getting feedback on how you approach something in a certain way. The other thing is that this concept of self-reflection and awareness can be really helpful, just as you think about when you get to a time when you're either interviewing for internships or full-time opportunities, being able to have some reflections on what you want to talk about, and also just knowing your own stories because you do have self-awareness can really valuable. And I think things like being able to carve out time to do a monthly reflection, right? Or taking the time to do a peer assessment or to ask your peers for feedback can help you practice that self-reflection and self-awareness that will really help you learn and grow and get to know yourself. And whether you're trying to use that because you want to learn and grow, whether you're trying to use that because you want to prepare for upcoming interviews, or if you're trying to use that just because you're trying to take advantage of this experience, practicing self-reflection and awareness is going to help you get to know yourself better so that you can develop not just in business school, but beyond. So again, here are the 6 tips that I just went through in terms of being able to chart your own course and to stay focused on your own personal vision and success. Being able to turn strengths into opportunities to make an impact. Making sure that you allocate your time to your priorities, and that at the end of the day, how you're spending your time really is aligned to what is most important to you. It's being able to experiment and take risks, and taking safe or intelligent risks and learning from them in a safe environment, and utilizing all those resources you have for you to try new ideas and to learn from them. Making sure you make time to invest in the relationships. And for those of you who really did want to go to the school because of the people, taking advantage of all the people that you have that are there. And then last but not least, being able to practice self-reflection and self-awareness, and making time and space to reflect upon what you've done and to learn more about yourself to continue that growth and development. Okay. Again, if you're interested in learning more about my book, make sure to check this out, as well as to check out mbaschool.com if you're looking for more insights on what it's like to be an MBA student, or how you can get the most value out of your MBA experience. I have lots of great content on different aspects of the MBA, whether you're trying to learn more about a particular industry or function, or you're trying to learn more about different aspects of the MBA experience, like recruiting or student activities or summer internships. There's all sorts of great content for you. And then certainly, again, if you're interested in learning more about the book, you want to get a sneak peek, make sure to check out this link so that you can get that and look for the book later this fall. Thank you.